Yay, we're alive. Okay, so in today's episode, and I'm really, really excited because in today's episode, I'm not on my own. I'm no longer alone. And I have my very, very, very first guest. And she is amazing. And you definitely are gonna love her. So let me welcome my beautiful guest, Dr. Alja Podgornik, is a neuroscientist and a subconscious reprogramming expert certified in theta healing. We'll need to ask her what that actually means. And she helps conscious and spiritual entrepreneurs skyrocket their business success by removing subconscious belief systems that keep them stuck. So excited to be talking about this. So she is particularly passionate about working with entrepreneurs who are here to dismantle the oppressive systems of patriarchy, wow, and white supremacy, wow, and use their medicine to create a just and harmonious world for all living beings. I love your intro. Alia, really, really happy to have you as my very first guest. Welcome. And, and just to add to your intro, I want to say that when I was checking you out and I landed on your profile on Facebook, I was captivated straight away. It's amazing. I love how smart you are, obviously. You're a scientist, which is great, which tells something. But on top of that, you are really bold. You voice your truth, and that always attracts people. And so I'm delighted to be here with you. I know this is going to be very interesting. I know this is going to be truthful. I already know that. And we chatted about stuff as well. So this is going to be really, really cool. Anything you want to say to start this conversation?
First of all, I just want to thank you for having me here. And I'm really, really excited to dive into that. I mean, as you said, my Facebook profile isn't even my main thing, but I have a little bit more of a spicy way of delivering things sometimes. I like to say that
The
my
word
love language is
spicy.
truth. Yeah, and it's very important to me. I really feel we live in time and space where humans are asked to step up their game as being humans, which is a very different thing as we're going to talk about, right? And stepping up game in like productivity and like forcing and pushing, which is what is meant with that a lot of the time. But we are called into a higher expression of ourselves, and this is why I'm here. I love working with entrepreneurs who are here to bring a new world into existence. That's really what it is. So very, very excited for this conversation.
Yeah, very, very happy. And so just, of course, you know that, and we talked about it, this podcast is called From Grind to Grace, and I'm exploring it's a huge topic. It's way bigger topic than most people even think, with the mainstream personal development, and maybe we can talk about it. It's such a deep topic because I think most people who keep going on their journey of entrepreneurship sooner or later hit a wall, and they see, oh, okay, right, okay, I need to dig really, really deep. And I told you that's what happened for me. Something unlocked. It was a spiritual experience. And when I say spiritual now, because the science is catching up, the word spirituality is even almost like irrelevant. It's just, right? It's just being, it's just who we are, human. Uh, and so I'm really glad to have you specifically with your knowledge on this episode, because you're gonna help unpack me and my audience, something deeper, and potentially we're gonna get some tips, some practical stuff as well from you. So to start with, in terms of my origin story and how this podcast came together, I've told in the previous episodes a little bit. Obviously, I'll be probably throwing things in just for the case, in case, it helps people even more. But I would like to hear a bit of your story. And I know it's amazing in a way, and I know a lot of people are gonna resonate with your story, and because it's a different context, maybe different path, but potentially very similar struggle and similar insights as for most people, who are trying to achieve something big and live their truth. So tell me a little bit about how you end up doing what you are doing right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like each of us has a slightly different story, but the themes are oftentimes very overlapping. So for me, my kind of, I call I always tell people, and I'm sure you're going to agree with that, if you want to speed up your personal growth, start a business. So really this past, God, now 6, 7 years for me has been just ongoing personal
So
growth. So
true. Mm.
I'm coming from a scientific background. So both of my parents are scientists, and I wouldn't say I grew up in an environment where dad was really, put on a pedestal. Like there are some people who grow in the families where parents who are scientists, or maybe even more than scientists, oftentimes you see doctors, they have a very kind of clear idea of what is worthy of being studied, right? Like um, the kind of vocations that fall into that category. With my parents, it was softer than that, but definitely there was just this a lot of, questioning. Like I was raised in this environment of like searching for facts, searching for truth, being very analytical. Even though personally, I actually have a very, very broad spectrum of interests, right? Even as a kid, I was very artistic. I was very creative. I was doing art and music. I loved humanities. I loved, history. All of these things came very naturally to me. But when the time came to choose the path that I was going to take at a time when I was 18, um, I chose, science. And really, I think a lot of that was influenced at a time with the whole narrative of like, if you want to get a stable job, you should go into STEM fields, right? Technical or scientific
Mm.
or so on. So I chose that. And I was genuinely also very interested in that. Neuroscience was something that I was always interested in human psychology, really just the question of why do humans behave the way they behave? Why do we function the way we function? But at the time, I knew I wanted to study it in a way that was very, as I called it back then, that wasn't wishy-washy. I wanted a hard scientific evidence. And so I'm originally from Slovenia. And of course, you couldn't study that in my home country or pretty much anywhere else in Europe. So I applied and got accepted to one of the best universities in England to study neuroscience. And so I left Slovenia when I was 18. I moved to England and I spent the next 4 years being there. And I finished my bachelor's and my master's there in neuroscience. And at a time, I was already in two minds about it, but I decided to continue with a PhD. And we're going to go more into that. But I decided to do a PhD and I got accepted to an institute here in Germany where I am now. And I completed my PhD after 4.5 years, which is now roughly 1 year ago. So I was really in like hardcore academia for about 8.5, 9 years. So a decent amount of time. And the irony is that I went into neuroscience. I remember writing my personal statement, for entrance into university. And I had this essay about how I was so interested in neuropsychiatric diseases and anxiety and depression, and how I'm all about doing research and developing the cure and the pill for that. Well, life has its ways. And so as I went and studied these things, it started becoming more and more clear to me that actually, Western science and Western medicine don't really know how to solve these problems, right? It's very symptoms based, it's very superficial. I studied a lot of pharmacology, so understanding how drugs interact with human physiology, not just nervous system, but, everything else as well. And the more I was studying, the more I was like, okay, that's different than what I thought it was. That's not nearly as specific. That's definitely like there are some drugs we give to people, we don't even know the mechanism of action. I was like, that's insane. Every single drug has side effects. Okay, that's not cool. So it was kind of this just, I just call it common sense, because anyone I think who really looks at this information starts seeing that
Mm.
something is different to how we're presented, with it being this golden standard, you know, that this is the one true way of achieving something. And for me, that really started, like, I started doubting things, questioning things, and so on. And long story short, in 2018, no, yes, 2018, at the end of my last year, I got a chance to participate at an ayahuasca retreat. And I was already very interested before in psychedelics and so on, as someone who studied neuroscience and pharmacology deeply. And that was when I had my first spiritual awakening. And really, in that, during that retreat, for me, everything was just shifted upside down, because all of a sudden, all these things I kind of knew, all these things I was questioning already, became very apparent to me. And I was like, that's like the way Western science approaches things, and Western medicine, and not the system, not the methodology, but the mindset, the beliefs, is not accurate. It's not how the universe actually functions. It's not how we are actually built. And about 2 months after, I moved to Germany, starting my PhD. And that was for me like a dark night of the soul, really, the
So
next
just
year and a
pause for
half.
the cause that first of all, I'm getting goosebumps already, you know, because of all the transformation and the awakening and the insights that you're getting. And it resonates with me. I completely know what you mean by talking about that conflict between the Western science and the knowingness. I like the word knowingness,
Yeah.
and how we speak highly about Western science and how our Western society lives and what we think is true, and as opposed to what the reality, the actual reality
Yeah.
is. So and the reason why I paused was like, so you basically, you still went to start to do your PhD even though you had that awakening happened already, right? And
Yes.
so how did you feel at that moment? How did it feel?
I was in a huge space of conflict, really. It was very challenging. You know, sometimes you may have experienced something like that. I think a lot of people have. There are times in life where you're on the path that you know it's not the path you're meant to walk long term. And from the moment when I started my PhD, for probably up until like really 3 years in, right, until I knew I was finishing up, I went through periods of questioning if I should quit, genuinely every 2 to 3 months. And then at the same time, there was something that was just, it was very clear that I wasn't meant to quit. You know, there's sometimes this pull and
Mm.
push and pull. And I was like, there is something I have to learn here. There is something I have to understand here. And it gave me a deeper understanding of how the system even works. It gave me a deeper understanding of how academia works. It gives you new, every time you do like a new step, you go deeper into certain systems, it gives you a certain level of insight. And it also, I think, one of the things it really gave me was truly understanding how people at every step of this path of awakening think, feel, and perceive reality. Because I've seen, being side by side, with walking this journey with some people who were going through the same process, but also being around people on both sides of the process. So some people who are maybe just starting to awaken, just starting to question certain things, and then people who are deeply into that. What is actually the process of awakening, right? It's given me a lot of compassion, a lot of understanding of the system, a lot of understanding of the nuance, which I think is very beneficial, because a lot of people, there's this big conflict oftentimes between, let's say, Western medicine and natural health. And, I went into natural health later. We may talk about this, but a lot of people are one or the other. You have obviously a lot of Western practitioners who are like, everything alternative is just scam, right? Even though they never tried
Yes.
anything. That's obviously like an ego thing. But then you also have a lot of people in the natural health field who are like, this is the only way. And that's also not true, right? Western medicine has absolutely its time and space, absolutely its usages. And if we learn, like I've been saying this for years, we got to learn how to bring these things together. We have to put our egos aside and just really see, right? Again, this truth element. What is useful where, right? For acute conditions, Western medicine, every time, if I break my leg, I'm not going to go to a naturopath, right? If I have sepsis, I'm not going to go to a naturopath. But if there's lifestyle related issues, and chronic conditions, I'm not going to go to Western doctor, right? Because they don't understand how to work with these things. And it's given me this really deep understanding of the whole process. It's also gave me a very deep understanding of myself, being in these situations, working with some very difficult bosses, very difficult people in science, like understanding myself more deeply. So it was a process that really, looking back, it really served me. It taught me a lot, and it was very difficult. It was really the process that about 6 months into starting my PhD pushed me into like a really deep dark night of the soul, a really deep burnout on all the levels, where my body started really shutting down. And that was what eventually prompted me to also really shift into natural
And
health
I'd
fields.
like to dig a little bit deeper into that dark, whatever dark was going on. Why do you think, what do you think caused it?
So there are two elements. There is the soul element, where there was simply the point in my life where I was ready to finish one cycle and start another one. And it was a learning experience, really looking back. So what I know this is now, and I've worked a lot, like the modality I use for subconscious reprogramming is an energy-based modality. It's what it's called a death portal. So it's one of the, we have death portals in our life, and these are portals where our soul gets a chance to exit this life or continue. And if we decide to continue, our soul we go through a very big upgrade. There's a lot that happens on an energetic level. We go through very big lessons that really shift our frequency. And that was one of them for me, a really big one, because it shifted me to really start embracing a different way of being, a different way of living.
And do you
Going
think so,
completely.
because of for the audience, do you believe that this is something that entrepreneurs need to undergo in most cases if they are super affected? And the conversation that we had the other day, we discussed how we are all affected and conditioned by the Western way of approaching business and entrepreneurship and personal growth. So it sounds like something there needs to sort of die for
Yes.
something
Yes.
fresh and pure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. It's what we call ego deaths, right? And we all
Right.
have them. And it's really the old version dying and the new being born, right? And ego deaths and death portals are two different things, right? Ego deaths can happen independently. Death portals are really like normally very big events in life, can be very difficult events in life when you are actually given a choice, are you going to continue living or not, right? But ego deaths, everybody has to go through them, because every time you undergo a deep transformation, you will undergo an ego death. Now, do ego deaths have to be dramatic, painful, all of this? I don't believe that. I don't subscribe to that belief, because it's a belief. And I've had massive transformations that were very painful, and I've had massive transformations that were very smooth, actually very chill, but really I would emerge on the other side and I was like, I am a different person.
Mhm.
So it can happen in a multitude of ways, because there, we'll talk about subconscious beliefs. There are people in especially spiritual communities who hold the belief that it has to be dramatic. A lot of spiritual world is addicted to drama, and that's a belief system, and it doesn't have to be there. So I want to just make that sure, so
That's
for people
that
to check with them.
that's exactly I think that's a very good thing to note for people to. I think sometimes people might be forcing the change because they
Yes.
think that it needs to happen this particular way.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%. And if you carry, I mean, as we will talk about later, our subconscious beliefs really create our reality, because our mind is constantly, first of all, they come with an energy, and energy creates matter, right? So what is first on the energy level, later, if the energy is consistent enough, present for like
Can you
long
explain
enough
this
and
a little
strong
bit
enough.
for the audience? When you said energy creates matter, you are the scientist here in that field. So
Okay, so I'm just gonna, like, a disclaimer, I'm not a physicist, right? So I want to make this very clear, because there are some people who have like science background and they come online and they're like, I'm a scientist, so I know all of this. But quite frankly, there are fields within neuroscience I'm not an expert in, right? So I want to give this as a disclaimer. This is not gonna be as like maybe detailed as if I speak about neuroscience.
And just one note, the reason why I'm asking is because, you know, when we start saying things like energy, frequency, vibration, it's all woo-woo and spiritual for so many people. However, the science is catching up.
Yeah.
And you know, the things like, you know, energy creates matter sounds like woo-woo, or used to sound, but it doesn't anymore. So this is why I'm asking you, you know, as a scientist, I know it's a different field, but still, you know, it's becoming common knowledge. I think in our circle, it's becoming common knowledge anyway.
So think about it this way. Life is movement. Whenever something stops moving, it's dead, right? So what is moving? Moving is frequency, it's vibration that happens at different levels of subtlety. So even if you think of how your body functions, how you perceive reality, you don't perceive matter. You perceive light waves. You perceive light energy hitting photons, hitting your eyes and transmitting the signal. And then your brain interprets that. A lot of it interprets based on what it was taught to interpret, right? Same goes for sound. Sound is waves, is energy. We're interacting with just big energy fields all around us. The reason why we are so materialistic is because our senses, so eyes, ears, nose, are tuned to perceiving very specific frequencies. So if you think of the whole light spectrum, you have infrared, you can't perceive. You have ultraviolet, you can't perceive. You can perceive the intermediate part. We know that some other animals like snakes can perceive infrared and cats as well, right? So they just have different physiology that allows them. We have, 3 receptors for perceiving color, but the mantis shrimp has 14. So the way they see the world is totally different. So for us, it's very important that we go beyond of this illusion, right? That the only thing that exists is matter. And we know that that's not true. It's just a belief so prevalent that people still think in that matter, right? We may logically know it's not the case, but people say what I can touch is real, what I can see is real, what I can smell is real. But what about everything else you can't, which is a vastly larger pool of energy?
And everything else that we can't still affects us, right? Like we say, ultraviolet light, like we don't perceive it consciously, but it's still there. It's around us, right?
Of course, we don't see ultraviolet light, but we all know what happens if you're in July in the midday in the sun for too long, right? Like we all feel it. Same goes for infrared.
Yeah,
Exactly. Now, when we talk about matter, what we have to understand is really, and I don't have a better way to explain this, but it's everything in our universe is just frequencies of different, like energy of different frequency. And what we can perceive for us, what we consider as matter, is, as I said, the frequency we're attuned to. So our frequency is slow enough. So that's frequency that has slowed down enough, energy that has slowed down enough to form matter. Something, because matter is dense. The denser the energy, right, the more kind of like tangible it is for us. And it simply means that we vibrate at the same frequency as the material world we perceive. That's really it. We just don't have, our body as humans was designed to exist in this space-time reality. Now, because of our conditioning, our indoctrination, our systems, most of us were taught that that's all there is, right? And even people who are, we have in the time of Renaissance, there was this big split of religion and science. And all the spiritual was dumped into like everything else together with religion. Right? So we still have this split in our minds that it's one or the other, but it's not true. If we look at it, quantum physics has proven now there's a quantum field connecting everything, right? Okay, we call it source, we call it God, we call it the universe, they call it a quantum field, but it's one and the same. So the moment, and I think we also will know that really great scientists, let's say Einstein, Tesla, they were very spiritual in their own way, right? If you look at the quotes that they talked about how everything is energy, and once you understand that, that's it, right? People who really understood how the universe works, which are people who are very attuned to a specific plane of consciousness, the laws of the universe, they can really like channel those things. They understand that the reality is deeply spiritual. And I would say that the longer you do science, if you don't have very, very, very strong beliefs that everything that is material is the only thing that's true, you will get to that point. But as we'll talk, beliefs are everything. And because of that, a lot of people stay stuck in these narratives that we may even have a lot of evidence aren't actually correct.
Okay, so actually now I kind of want to go two different ways. So let me let me talk about both of them. So first I want to kind of go back to your story where you were doing your PhD and what happened next. And then and maybe they are related. And the other way is to bring home the point maybe around energy and how people, entrepreneurs can actually achieve a breakthrough and really grow, and how it's different from what we learn from this common personal development, and maybe why it's has its limitations. And you and I, we talked about it, like it's maybe too logical, there's too much thinking in it, as opposed to really sort of diving into who we really are, where there is no logic per se, right? So maybe those two paths somehow, somewhere
They will
intersect.
converge.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, they will converge. So
Okay.
I'll do it. I'll do like a TLDR short version. So basically, after starting my PhD, as I said, I went through this very deep healing process. So my body really was telling me it's time to change things. A lot of things happened. And that was riding on top of me having chronic health conditions my entire life. So from the day I was born on. So that was a point for me when I was like, I am ready to be done with this. And so for me, the next few years were really diving very, very deep into natural health. So I worked with a lot of different practitioners. I studied Ayurveda. I did bioresonance, like detoxes, you name it. I probably did it. And it took a while because my issues were really deep. But after, maybe a year and a half or so, I started seeing really massive changes. So if I think about, how it was in 2019, I was covered in eczema. Like I had skin rash all over. This is something I suffered from the entire life. 2 years later, it was gone. Right. And now I have none of these issues anymore, even though I was told by Western doctors I would live with that for the rest of my life. Not true. And as I went through these major breakthroughs myself, I was like, okay, this is incredible. Like, I have to learn this and I need to share this with the world. And so it was in 2020 to 2021 that I started my own business. And I studied with an Ayurvedic health coach to teach Ayurvedic health habits. And that was then what started my process of becoming an entrepreneur. And I think this is something a lot of people are going to resonate with as well. I entered this entrepreneurial world, and I went into it with this belief that good strategy was that's what makes or break a business, right? And I studied strategy, I learned how to do sales calls, like how to have a Facebook group, all of those things that I teach you. And I'm absolutely not saying strategy isn't
Pause
important,
for the
right?
cause again. This is the same thing as, as I had, and I'm also, I was on into spirituality, meditation, and those kind of things for a while. But when I started on entrepreneurial journey, I don't know, like, and you are saying the same thing. You kind of ignore that other side, that spirituality side, I am thing, and then you were still affected. That is such a weird thing to me. I was affected by that. You were affected by that, even though you had that already in your. A lot of people don't know about those things, and that's kind of like it's kind of normal that they get affected by this logical way of doing things, strategy, and those kind of things. But you were affected anyway, and I was affected anyway. So what the hell? What the hell is going on? Why is that?
Oh, that's a lot to unpack. So I would say, again, it comes down to what we believe about things. And here's the thing. Spirituality is something that we need to understand, a lot of us, that if we weren't raised with that, it takes time to truly integrate that. There has to be an internal shift in frequency.
Mhm.
And before that really gets integrated, it normally takes time, takes experience, takes practice, consistency. The default beliefs that we were raised with, which is that, what matters is working hard, and what matters is structure, and what matters is discipline, and, you trade time for money, and all of these other beliefs that can go even beyond just, our childhood, but even into our ancestry, they will prevail. And if we're not aware of them, if we don't clear them, we're going to go back to the default path, especially when we're starting something new,
Mm.
right? The second thing I think is that what I have seen in myself and a lot of people, most of us, the system we're raised with, and this has a lot to do with, systems I talk to, like patriarchy, and how these things are structured, is that we are taught to outsource our authority to external people. So when we were young, we had to do what our parents told us. A lot of us, if we acted the way we wanted to, we would be punished. Then in school, we were told that, teachers are gods, that they know what's best. And if we questioned authority, a lot of the time we were punished, right? And that continues through the whole system of school, because academia that comes out of an educational system is very, very, very hierarchical. And so we have these beliefs that someone outside of us is our authority. And so then we come into these new fields where we honestly are not experts, and we completely outsource everything.
Mm.
And then if someone comes and tells us, well, strategy is the key, right? Then we're like, oh, well, it must be true. And, a lot of the time, the thing is, and I firmly believe each of us is on their own perfect journey, right? So I learned so much from those experiences. And what I see
Totally.
now is that those people who taught is just strategy and it worked for them, because their energetics, their mindset, their beliefs were so, so solid already that they didn't have imposter syndrome. They didn't have self-doubt. They didn't have all these things that will stop
That's
you in your
true.
track. And then
Yeah.
they create this narrative that is just strategy. And for them, it is.
And I
But
have a third point that I want to kind of include in this, like the third theory is that, is it the case that these people who are all about grinding and discipline, they are actually speaking louder? Because
yes.
because spirituality, that side of life is gentle, it's flowing, it's quieter. And also, you and I know that when you know the truth, you don't have to shout about it. Like it grounds you, you know?
I think that's a part of it, but I think it goes deeper than that, because so two things. Okay. I mean, spirituality is a lot of things, right? Spirituality can be very fierce. Spirituality can be fighting as well. So we can't put spirituality just in the feminine thing, right? That's one facet of it. But even within feminine, if we look at goddesses, we have something like Kali, we have something like Durga, and that's a Hindu, which are
Mm.
very fierce forms of it. But I think what's also the case, with a lot of those people, or let me put it this way, we cannot forget that our own frequency also attracts situations in our life that resonate with it. So
Yeah.
I can see how back then I signed up to work with someone who taught that way because I was at that wavelength. I would never go study with that teacher now, ever. But at the time, it served me, right? And it was a springboard for me to start understanding, oh, actually, it goes a lot deeper than this. Like, it's not everything, there's more to it. And as I had this shift within me, then I started also seeking out other coaches that spoke about the mindset part, that spoke about the energy, that spoke about all of these other things. And it was a progression to now, when I look back, a lot of those coaches, I wouldn't work with them anymore, right? And
Mhm.
this is a natural process of slower awakening. All
And
of
then
this is
so the
awakening.
question is, and I wonder then what was it like for you? Because for me, yes, I was grinding. Yes, I can be super disciplined. Yes, I can create so much just from just on the intellectual level. And, I became this marketing expert, this world class copywriter. I learned all these things, and I should be happy and I should be confident. And so, but I did not feel that way. Right. So I did feel the disconnect. I did feel I wasn't playing big enough. And enough, I meaning the way I somewhere deep down know that I could. So I all along I felt that. Did you feel that there was a
Yeah,
disconnect?
100%, 100%. And there are, I think, different layers to this, which one thing for me that really came up, which is why I do what I do now, is all the trauma and, you know, what I now see are all subconscious beliefs, the imposter syndrome, like thinking I wouldn't be able to deliver for my clients, being really scared of that, being really scared of the backlash. And for me, that really stopped me in my track where no strategy helped. And I think one part is for me, what was this conflict, disconnect, whatever we want to call it, between what I knew I was capable of
Mm-hmm.
and what I felt. You
Mm-hmm.
know, because these beliefs, like our subconscious mind is directly interconnected to our nervous system. So it creates these experiences of contraction, like fight or flight, you know, adrenaline, like feeling really scared, the stomach tying into a knot. And for me, those subconscious beliefs and energies created so much resistance that they made me close my business down after a year and a half. Even though I successfully enrolled, you know, I had a full roster for my first group, I had people leading, they had results. I was at the point where I couldn't continue because I felt ashamed of what I was doing, because I had really deep beliefs. I had a deep belief I was a fraud. And that's a past life
Getting
belief. We can
chills.
talk about it later.
I'm getting chills. I can't remember if I mentioned to you, like I did not quit, but at some point on my journey, because I used to be a content machine. I used to
Yeah.
create content to the left, to the right every day. There were months and months of doing Facebook Lives 7 days a week, so I can
Yeah.
totally do it. But then at some point, a while ago, I was so done with making content for the sake of making content. Yes,
Yes.
I was attempting approximating to who I really was, sort of, right? But it just didn't feel 100% authentic. And at some point, I was just done and I stopped posting, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And this is at that point, no strategy can overcompensate for it. Which is why I
exactly.
always, you know, when entrepreneurs come and work with me, I'm like, do you have strategy knowledge? Like at least basic, you know? Do you know how to build a basic funnel? Do you have a freebie? You know, do you know how to create content? Because it's important. But strategy should amplify who you are, right? It should amplify. The
Yeah.
content is supposed to be a reflection of you, right? And it's always when people see and read your content, they feel your energy, you know? They feel like your authentic self is, I always like to say, what people don't understand about this whole thing is that your truth, who you are, is the foundation, because your truth creates polarity, right? It creates what you stand for and what you don't stand for, who you are and who you aren't, what you like and what you don't like. And when you have
You
two
cannot
poles,
create, and we do, like, did you do those exercises, set your goals, do a list of your values? And I used to think, what are
exactly,
my values, what are my values,
exactly.
what are my goals? Well, okay, let me say this is my goal, but somehow doesn't feel right, like the values. Oh, let's come
Exactly.
up with values, let me convince myself about my
and then you
values.
and then you write down things you think you're supposed to write, and it's all
Yeah.
your beliefs and your indoctrinations coming down. And you know that's not it, right? Because your soul is like, no. And then you're not actually, that's not your truth. And it's, you know, it's like this truth that creates these poles, and it creates, what do you get when in nature, when you have two poles? You get a magnet. It creates a magnetism. And then the right people are attracted to you and the wrong people are repelled from you, right? And then all of a sudden, well, you're getting clients that, you know, you have the most amazing sessions with because they resonate with you. You get people who are really on board with your mission. Your content speaks that, and people are like, ooh, I like this person. Ooh, I want to pay
Like,
this person.
it's so amazing. Like, and I believe it was the case for you as well. Like, intellectually, I knew all these things.
Yes.
Like, oh, repel the wrong people, you'll attract the right people. But it was like, again, like convincing myself. It's kind of like logically thinking, okay, I don't want these kind of people, so I kind of need to say the opposite things to them, like kind of
Yes.
whatever. But
Yes.
when it finally clicked for me, it
Yeah.
just happened naturally. And what actually happened, that the wrong people kind of, I became like kind of it's like an allergic reaction. It's very, very natural reaction. I just don't want to deal with these people. you know, rather than
Exactly.
convincing yourself it's okay, rejection is okay. And, you know, like you don't need to do that anymore when it clicks.
It's and it's such power that comes from that because I remember, I pivoted my business only a few months ago, right? I was in natural health until January, February. I finished with my last client like 2 weeks ago, right? So it's really very recent. And as I started speaking out about my values, and if anyone goes to my profile, you'll see I speak a lot about what's happening in Palestine. Like I'm very clear on my values around that. That was very polarizing. So I saw my follower number going down every day. And I was so happy because I was like, oh my God, now I finally have a group of people in my following who are really on board with me, you know? And instead of getting then into these metrics of like, oh my God, I'm losing followers, that's bad. I'm like, those people would never work with me anyways. And I wouldn't want to work with them. That's not
And
why I'm here.
for me as well, like, I used to, be in the room with the right people, be in these rooms for all the intricacies and nuances around these strategies and around, insider knowledge and whatever. And I used to think, okay, eventually I want to get into this room and into that room. Guess what? The rooms I want to get into changed.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Exactly. And it's again, you know, for me, I really think that, as an entrepreneur, you're going to start where you start and it's perfect for you. And doing this work, when you're really clearing out these beliefs that are keeping you away from knowing who you truly are, this is the only way to be really, truly empowered. Because otherwise, we get into these things and everybody's giving us these recipes. You should be in these rooms and you should do this. And oh, your net worth is equaling to your network. And all of these other, things that people say. And it's like, but what about your heart? What about your body? Like, do you know what rooms you're meant to be in? Right? Is that actually a room for you? Doesn't matter what's on the paper. If it's not aligned with your soul path, it's not gonna produce the results you probably deeply desire,
Exactly.
right? And this is once we're in our truth, we start evaluating these things. And for me, the most beautiful thing right now, is that I'm at a stage where I'm again going really deep into business strategy after doing all the belief work. But now I approach it very differently. When people tell me, oh, this is how you should do it, I'm like, yes, I'm going to take, 80% of this, but these 20, that does not align with how I want to do business. And I'm going to drop it. And I feel good with myself. I'm like, I trust myself. I trust my intuition. I'm
Yeah.
going to go into understanding why certain things work because good strategy makes business easier.
And
That's very important.
the metaphor we are using with my business partner is that, take a framework and paint
Exactly.
that
I love
framework,
that. Yes, I love that.
rather than just tick every box. And guess what? That removes the fear of failure. And failure is
Yes.
not even relevant anymore
No, it's not even
because
relevant unless you subscribe to it.
you either play or you fail.
Yeah,
That's how I perceive it. When you play and create, I mean, I don't know at this stage of my life when how it's gonna come out, and it's okay, whatever is gonna come out, it's fine. You
exactly. And this is
know?
such a thing. I had that thing a while ago, like a big shift, and I was like, you can only fail if you decided you failed because it's you who decides that, you failed and you quit. Like you can just keep going. You can just
And
say,
there
okay,
are
I'm
no
taking a
boxes
break
to
now.
tick. When you
Of
need to
course
tick
not.
boxes, of course you're gonna miss some boxes. But when there are no boxes to tick, so who cares? Nobody knew what
Yeah,
the boxes were in the beginning. There were no boxes, you know.
exactly.
So yeah, it's really, really cool. So how do you think somebody who's an entrepreneur and feels that she's stuck? She's
Mhm.
stuck in the grind. She keeps promising herself, okay, it's around the corner, it's coming, it's around the corner, and it's been like a year or two or maybe more of saying that, and she's stuck and she has no way out, and she's like suffering inside.
Mhm.
Where do you and I'm assuming a lot of people in my audience are affected by this conventional personal development and conventional way of doing business and doing entrepreneurship. Where do you think somebody like her should start looking, should start maybe seeking certain knowledge or What would be your advice?
First things, it's always the truth. You got to look at it and you got to get very honest with yourself. What is it that you like and what is it that you don't like about how you're doing things? And really go away from this, think of like, it should be this way, it should be that way. I should be happy because of X. I shouldn't be happy because of X. And get very clear on like, how do you feel? Are you frustrated? Are you drained? Are you exhausted? Right? Then, one thing you can always look at is systems. Is there something there? But if there are these deep feelings of stuckness, we need to understand where they're coming from. And let's say that these feelings are coming, these experiences are coming from the way you're running your business. Then we need to understand why you are running your business in this way. And underneath our beliefs, always the way we identify subconscious beliefs are two main. First is emotional triggers. If you have an experience and it triggers a really strong emotion, like a heavy emotion, that can be jealousy, that can be anger, that can be, guilt, that's a pathway in. The other one is patterns. So look at the patterns in your business. And patterns I'm talking about, it can be how people communicate with you. It can be how you work, right? Let's say you're always overworking. Let's say you should be out there playing with your kids, but you keep pushing and grinding, right? It can be emotions. Are you experiencing constantly frustration, stress, overwhelm? There's a reason. There are beliefs underlying this that are serving you in some way. So you may have a belief that unless you work at least 8 hours a day, you can't achieve success, right? You may have a belief that you have to grind. You may have a belief that unless you work really hard, you're not worthy of succeeding. Then there can be things where you're afraid of success at some point. There are a lot of people who are wildly afraid of success. And we, in subconscious reprogramming, we go in and we really check and we ask these questions. So you can always, let's say you're working towards a goal. That's a great exercise everybody can do, but you have to be honest with yourself. If I had what I want, what bad thing would happen? Because there's oftentimes a belief, let's say people have, I had a session yesterday with a client and she's been working towards, a certain money amount for a while and she hasn't been able to break through. And then we went into subconscious reprogramming and it turned out that she grew up in a very affluent neighborhood and she was very poor and she couldn't afford other things. And she started really resenting those kids because they could have everything. And she held a belief that if she is affluent, she will lose her heart. So of course, if you're someone who's wanting to act in integrity, you're not going to allow yourself to achieve that success because you believe you're going to become a bad person, quote unquote.
And I believe so many people are like, so many entrepreneurs are like that. But the good news is, like, and I think you said it in the beginning, that if you want to grow or spiritually start a business, start your own business or something along the line. Oh my God, it's such a it's such a big growth and healing school being on entrepreneurship journey. It's so amazing, and it's especially amazing when it clicks and it kind of comes together, and especially now that we said this conventional personal development has its limitations, so we need to look deeper, and that's what it is. That's what it is.
Yes, and it's, business is going to confront you with who you are, especially if you're building a personal brand, because what's the basis of that? You need to allow yourself to be seen. There's always a threat of backlash. You need to be able to speak your truth. Well, if you speak your truth, you're going to trigger some people, especially in today's internet. Like everybody gets triggered for everything. You're going to offend people. So you need to be ready for that, right? And there are beliefs of what would that mean for you. A lot of people block themselves at the level of visibility. I used to. I wouldn't go on the podcast 1 year ago. I was like, what am I going to say? Right. And there are so many things that you're going to be confronted with. Then there's, of course, also, there is perseverance, there is resilience, there is who are you when things look like they're not working? Like, do you trust yourself? Do you truly trust that you can charge a certain price for your services, that you can deliver? So many things you're going to be confronted with that have to do with your own self-worth, with your own self-image. It's a beautiful place for personal
and
self-worth.
I think you said I think that's key. When you feel that friction and you feel that resistance, that's a sign that something is misaligned.
I wouldn't call it misaligned. We have to be very careful here because there is a narrative in the spiritual world that, you know, if it's aligned, everything is going to be smooth flow. And that's not true. Whenever you push out of your comfort zone, you're going to trigger your nervous system. And there's going to be a bit of like this friction. And you have to learn, and as an entrepreneur, you have to learn how to walk with this friction of expansion. However, there is a difference between, let's say, you know, raising your prices and feeling a little bit of this like, ooh, this is edgy, and feeling like this massive fear when you're like, oh my God, the world is collapsing. Like, I can't do this. My nervous system is like exploding. If it's the second one, we got to go and really look at what's going on, right? And I think you also see, you know, there's this thing when you're aligned on your with your path, with your general direction, resistance becomes bearable. Doing tedious work becomes bearable
That's
because you're
it.
working
Yeah.
towards something greater. There will be resistance. Every time you expand, there is resistance because your subconscious mind loves maintaining status quo. Why? Because your subconscious has one role, and this is to keep you safe, to keep you alive. So subconscious, based on past experience, knows certain ways that have guaranteed your survival in the past. And even if those ways suck, right? It's going to be like, oh, but this is what we know. You know, like emotional abuse. Yeah, okay, it doesn't feel good, but that's how we grew up. That's what we're used to. We made it, right? So then you're going to be attracting partners maybe that keep emotionally abusing you, and you're going to tolerate it. That's kind of how your subconscious works. So whenever you go outside of that, there's going to be some resistance, and that's okay. That's okay, because if we're staying in comfort zone, then we cannot grow, right? Then our business won't grow.
And do you
But when
think
you
that there are different types, like for me, the way I felt it, the kind of resistance I used to feel before things clicked, and the kind of resistance that I feel after that, they are two different things.
absolutely,
And this one now I can clearly see and control, handle.
yes, exactly.
That one was like like a black hole. Like, I
Yes.
mean, like something is stopping me. Like I get up in the morning and I said, today I'm gonna send messages, do outreach, and I'm gonna send 10 messages. And by the time I sit at my desk here, all that decision is gone. All that bravery is gone. So, but now that is not happening. This other internal resistance, and it's kind of like I kind of grow it, like I kind of handle it.
Exactly. And I found that personally, that resistance actually starts becoming enjoyable at some point because you
Mhm.
start seeing when you have the tools to do this, right? When you have the tools to walk yourself through resistance, you see it as an opportunity. You're like, ooh, interesting. I'm feeling resistance around this. What
Mhm.
is happening? What's underlying it? And then if you see that, let's say, like your perception of it, that there are beliefs around it that you can get rid of, you're like, cool, let's clear that. And sometimes you see there's resistance and there isn't this underlying it. And you're like, okay, so would there be a more aligned way to do this? Not because I'm trying to avoid the challenge, right? Because that's a very important thing. Sometimes people are like, yes, it's aligned because, I'm going to transform it so it's comfortable. That's what I talked about before. We don't want that. But you can say, is there a little tweak I can do? Let's say you get a script for doing whatever, closing sales. And you look at that script and you're like, I get it, but also there's like a little bit of I can make a tweak here, or I can speak
Mhm.
differently. I can really speak from the heart. That's the simple thing. There's a difference if you show up to a conversation with the intention of closing a sale versus really getting to know the human on the other side and really understanding, is this good alignment? And then if yes, helping them find a way to go into the program. That's a very different energy, right? And that in and of
Yeah.
itself, when you're working from your heart, changes everything.
How can people access their heart?
There are many ways to access the heart. So here's the thing, we need to understand what is blocked. Well, okay, let me restart this. There are techniques like the one I'm using where we can go and we can really work with what is blocking the heart, right? And there are certain beliefs. So the heart has all to do with love, right? That's heart chakra. And I'm not just talking love person to person, but this universal
Yes.
love. So the things we would look at here, for example, is, do you know how to receive love? A lot of people don't. And in the subconscious reprogramming technique I work with, it's a very unique way of doing it. Theta healing is very unique because yes, it's belief change, but it's a much larger system of energy healing as well. You can, let's call it, install, like program certain frequencies into the body. So if a person, the thing is, sometimes when you go into this personal development space and when you start working with energy, probably one of the first things that's going to come up is the law of attraction. And the law of attraction is real. It's one of the many laws of the universe. However, it's not the only one. And also, then what they're going to tell you is like, oh, feel the feelings of the manifestation or whatever you're creating already happening. And our emotions, feelings are the frequency. So it's not that that doesn't work, it works. However, sometimes people will be like, what would you feel like if you got what you want to have? Like, oh, I'd feel a lot of joy, I would feel a lot of gratitude, or this. And they're like, okay, you should feel these things, but what happens if that person never felt authentic joy in their life? Right? And
Mm.
if we have someone who grew up in a very abusive environment, or maybe their ancestors had depression and they have genetic predispositions for depression, they have different combinations of receptors in the body, they may have never felt joy. So we can go in this very deep theta brainwave state, that
Wow.
is the brainwave that acts as the subconscious, and we can install these energies that these people never felt. And then
Wow.
you can actually start, this is very powerful, and just installing these
Wow.
feelings oftentimes removes the associated beliefs. So with the heart, you would go and you would really work with this. Do you know how to receive love? A lot of women don't, right? That's why they go into
Wow.
grind, 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 instead of this ease of like, of course I can receive.
Or they forgot there has been so much hardship, over
Exactly.
time, for
Exactly.
years and years and years. I remember when I used to think, I lost myself. I lost myself, a combination of things in my life, my business, motherhood, this and that, whatever. I was like, oh my God. They tell me, just do you. It should be happy days because when I was in 9 to 5, I couldn't do me and nobody even, like, I mean, it wasn't even an option or even a concept, right? Just do you. Yes, I can do me. Wait, what?
What is that?
What is that? It's like,
Yeah.
and so like, and then people tell me, oh, what would you like to do? Or what would you like for dinner? Or stop asking me. I don't know. I don't know
Yes.
what I want to, so,
Yes.
I was in that place and it's like, and like, I knew I was aware that things are off and there is this thing called me, but I didn't know how to access me. I didn't, like you said it, like, oh my God, that's such a good point. Some people don't know how to feel joy or
Yeah.
happy. Such a
Yeah.
good point.
And so many, especially when we talk for women, we have to understand, and the technique I work with, we understand that subconscious beliefs, they're, when you work with, let's say, some other types of hypnosis or so, some people really stand for this belief that you form your subconscious beliefs in the first 7 to 10 years of your life. Because during that time, your brain is in this subconscious state constantly. This is why, children have such incredible imagination, right? It's,
Yeah.
they are in the brainwave state where they're just absorbing what's happening. But the truth is that we can bring beliefs from our ancestors, we can bring them from collective subconscious, past lives, etc. And when we look at women, especially, let's say, and it's really most of the world, but almost anywhere in the world, if you go 2 generations back, they experienced war, they experienced displacement, they experienced famine, they experienced massive migration. If you're in Europe, it may be 1 generation back, we had 2 world wars in the past 100 years. That affects our epigenetics profoundly. That has been scientifically shown. But also, there's the energy level of DNA that holds this and that influences the matter, right? As we talked about before, that holds these memories. So when I worked with this myself, the part of Slovenia I come from was very heavily affected by both world wars. My mom's lineage was in the resistance. They were a part of it. Multiple family members were burnt alive by the fascists. They were taken to concentration camps. They escaped on the way there. Very heavy experiences. Women in my lineage didn't have anyone to take care of them. They were alone. They didn't have partners. They developed the belief God betrayed them. They are alone for everything, and they cannot afford to rest because they had two major beliefs around rest, which are really sad, really heavy. One, they need to take care of their kids. And two, if they rest, they will never get up again.
I'm still, yes. Oh my God.
Yes.
I'm still working on this for myself. I still find it hard to allow myself a day off,
Yes.
allow myself to pause. And I know now that the creativity, the ideas, all those things are in the pause. And I'm still learning that.
And
It,
we need to understand here, this is really important because sometimes we get into these narratives in spiritual communities that, oh, you should just rest more. Again, that's to me like saying you should smile more, like, or you should stop being depressed. Like, it's useless. And the reason it's useless is because these beliefs that we carry helped us or our ancestors survive.
mm,
Our subconscious believes that if we stop working, we will die. That's the gravity of it. So,
wow.
of course, it's not as simple as saying just
Wow.
rest. It's protecting us. And this is why so many of us are getting stuck and we feel resistance with these basic things that we really shouldn't, quote unquote, feel resistance around. We have beliefs that are telling us we're not going to make it. I had the belief that if I sit down and if I take a day off and if I stop working, I will never start again. I
Yeah,
just won't do it.
I'm gonna
That's
lose the
it.
momentum. I'm gonna this and this and that. I'm gonna forget what I was doing, or whatever. Or I'm not gonna get there fast enough.
Exactly. And what does that mean? Right? Then we can go into what does that mean fast enough? What happens if you don't get there fast enough?
Yeah,
And then we realize there are new beliefs underlying it. Everything's going to collapse. I'm not going to make it. This is oftentimes when you go deep enough, you will realize there's the fear of death underlying it. Like, you'd be surprised how often with the most bizarre things that we start looking at the surface
wow.
level situation or belief. And then you dig. And you're like, oh, sometimes it goes beyond that. Sometimes people are like, I'm scared I'm going to die and everyone's going to forget me. Right? It's the remembering thing. And that's when you clear that, the whatever was happening on the surface like goes away. But it's so, I always want to, with everything, every time I teach, every time I talk, I want to really convey the understanding. It's not subconscious blocks, right? It's not that your subconscious is ever being like a little gremlin trying to, sabotage you. It doesn't sabotage you. It's trying to keep you alive. It's trying to keep you safe. So what we need to do is change your subconscious understanding of what it says. Teach it that it's safe to rest. Teach it that it's okay, that nothing's going to come crashing down. We show ourselves, both our conscious and subconscious, where this is coming from so we understand it's not relevant, and then we change these things
And
at
on
the
very
level of that.
practical level, as in like, how do I even start? So what's helping me? And I see trees here, in front of me, a lot of trees. I love them. And I keep basically reminding myself of the evidence in nature that shows flow.
Yes.
The tree is
Yes.
not in a hurry. These clouds are not in a hurry. No, nothing is in any rush. It's the way it is, and it's the way it's supposed to be, and it's all, natural, and the tree still grows. Who decides how long it needs to take for the tree to reach whatever, like, 5 meter height,
Yeah.
you know?
For sure. For sure. And really honoring our own journey, honoring the things are unfolding as they're meant to, right? Really seeing, looking at the process, not the end goal. Obviously, everybody's heard that. It's a bit cliche, but it's true. And it's also important to understand that we can reprogram ourselves in many ways, right? I would say the technique I use now, I use because it's been by far the quickest and by far the most powerful. I have worked with breath work before. I have worked with different types of yoga. I have worked with plant medicine. I have tried a lot of different things. And this methodology really helps. But you can do it somatically. You can do it as you're saying, that you're just, when you get a thought that is in this direction of urgency, pressure, all of this, you're like, tap 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 tap, let me stop that here, let me choose a different thought. That is one way to do it. It takes longer,
Yeah.
but it does work. And again, there are levels, because if we have beliefs that are really strong, really survival based, those will normally need some somatic work. you will not be able to do it just from your mind. You will need to do really practices to access the emotion and feeling and release the frequency from your body, or you will use some energy technique, subconscious reprogramming
Yeah,
technique
and
that I
it's like
use.
it's more like you know, quick aid in the moment. You know, like of course there is deeper work, but something to start with, or something, you know,
Yes,
to have something in your back pocket when something happens, like where you are in a move or some, you know, and nothing else
for
is
sure.
available. So
For sure. And I
yeah,
do that, right? I think combining these things together is really beautiful. Like sometimes you're taught, and like when you're doing sales and marketing, you have to convince people your method is the best. And I'm like, of course I believe my method is the best. That's why I teach it, but I'm never going to say it's the only way you can do the work, right?
yeah,
There's so many
exactly.
ways, and if you make a decision that you want to change something, you will be shown the way to doing it. So
Yeah.
some of you may be listening to this podcast and you'll be like, I really want to do subconscious reprogramming. And that's going to be right for you. Some other entrepreneurs will discover someone who teaches somatic practices and they'll be like, ooh, let me
Yeah.
do this. This is for me. And it's beautiful because as you make this choice and as this choice comes from your soul, it means that the soul has already made a decision that it's going to be done,
Yes.
right? So and
Yeah.
because time doesn't really exist, like time isn't really linear, it means that it is done already, you're just catching up. So thinking about it in this way, if it's an authentic desire, just trust that desire and you will be shown the way, but also trust it may take a different amount of time and it will look differently to how you imagine it. That's also a part of the journey.
So I absolutely love this idea of abundance and manifestation of what already is into the physical world. And this is another topic I love to dive in, and I could be talking to you forever. I've been glancing at the time now. It's like conscious of the time, and there is so much to still talk about and unpack, and it's super, super, super interesting to be chatting with you. So I'm sure I'm gonna have you on my podcast again at some point. But tell us about where people can find you.
Mhm. So the best way to connect with me right now is Instagram in this moment. I am in the process of also creating a private group where people can come in for free and you're going to be able to experience subconscious reprogramming. We're going to do like the process together. I'm going to teach you. I don't know if I'm going to teach you how to do it, but I'm going to teach you the whole process of it and we're going to do it together. So that's going to be a really beautiful way to
So
come and
make
really
sure
get
to
an
share the link
experience.
when you have
I
the
will
group to
share.
share with,
Yes.
so I can put the link in the notes
Yeah.
for this episode.
And
Yeah.
I have also a free mini course available. There's also going to be a link. And there you also can experience going into theta brainwave state, like the subconscious state. You're going to experience, we do in that meditation downloads. So, what I talked about, downloading specific feelings that
Mhm.
entrepreneurs really need around trusting yourself, around understanding abundance, around all of these things. So, that's also a beautiful thing to go into. It's completely free. You just have to jump in. So, I would say these are the best ways right now. There will be more in the future, but connect with me on social media. And if you have any questions, anything like this, just shoot me a DM and I will be in touch for sure.
Sounds good. And one final question that was sort of hanging for me, with all of your changes and you basically being on the science side and then embracing this other side in your life, how did your external life change? And people, what did people around you say? What did your parents say? What's going on externally?
So my life looks very different than it did back then in terms of how I take care of myself. But I would say, especially in terms of people that I keep around myself, a lot of my friendships changed. I have incredible new people in my life that are really aligned with this. My health has changed profoundly. My financial situation has changed. Everything's different. Your external reality, again, energy collapses into matter. As you change energy, material world around you will begin to shift. So it's been a journey. There are some people who absolutely don't vibe with the new version of who I am, and those people fell away. That's beautiful. There are people that, maybe I knew in high school or so that we didn't have connection for multiple years, and we are reconnecting now because they also went through deep personal transformation. And that's really beautiful. My family certainly had to get used to it. And I think they're still getting used to it, quite frankly. But they're on board with it. It's slowly happening. We disagree with many things, but we are learning to coexist harmoniously while disagreeing about certain things. And that's also, a lesson that we all get to go through. But what I can say is that my relationships with my family members, especially my mom, changed drastically through this work, because especially when you do a lot of work on your own energy, you one thing a lot of people don't know is that certain energies in your field will attract certain responses from other people. So if you carry energies of, like, there are people who carry beliefs of, let's say, I must be abused, and that's a really heavy belief. I've worked with this with my clients before. And then you're going to have people who abuse you in your life, and because that energy you carry, that belief triggers their response. And so as I cleared a lot of these things out, my relationship, especially with my mother, that used to be very difficult in a lot of ways, changed dramatically. There is no more drama where there was constant drama before. There is a lot more support, mutual understanding, and some of these shifts are very dramatic. So this work is very deep and it changes things. I always say, look, if you like, when you come work with me, especially if you come one-on-one work, you gotta be ready. You're gonna be a very different person on the other side. So, be ready for like a big transformation, because it is going to happen, but it's going to be much more aligned with who you are. And that's always, always worth it.
That's so amazing. Such a good place to stop this episode, which I don't want to do, but we could be talking here for hours. But anyway, thank you so much. So much. It's such an amazing topic. And I just can't believe like I have you as my guest, my very first guest on my podcast with this kind of knowledge and experience and transformation and abundance and wideness, expansion. I just love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. Thanks so much. I think it was really useful and interesting for my audience, and I believe we'll be talking again. And for now, bye.
Bye, everyone.